Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. My guest today is Anthony Lacoudre. Welcome to the show. You're a lawyer by profession, but also a language enthusiast, and you've written this fascinating book called The Incredible History of French Words in English. I find this fascinating, particularly as a Franco-American. It's all in the title, but also in the subtitle here, how English people speak French without knowing it. Now, we tend to say that English is a hybrid language, a mix between German and Latin, but you say actually half of the English words come from French.
Yes, that's correct. Half of every adjective, noun, or verb that an English speaker, an English native speaker would say or read is derives from French or is French. Absolutely.
And you've counted these words. You say that there are 25,000. It's a compilation that took you 10 years. How did you count them?
Yes, the easiest way to count them is to go through pages of a dictionary of etymology. And so such a dictionary will give you the exact origin of every word. And so, yeah, you can count them easily this way. Yeah.
And you talk about a linguistic invasion from French to English, and it actually started with a real invasion of William the Conqueror in 1066.
Yes, it all started in 1066 when William the Conqueror, Duke of Normandy, invades England and defeats Harold during the Battle of Hastings, and is crowned on New Year's, on Christmas Day on 1066 at Westminster Abbey. And then starting that moment, the new language of the kingdom is French, and the masses will continue to speak Old English or this Germanic English, and over time massively French vocabulary will be integrated into the Old English. That's really how it started.
It was imposed at first, and then it became more of a voluntary acceptance of...
Yeah, no, that's true. It started with a military event, if you want, and over time, especially during the Renaissance, English linguists accepted new words, new contingents of words completely willingly, for sure.
Because you mentioned in your book that during the Renaissance there was a second wave, if you will, of French words that were introduced into English, and also some French words in English that were Latinized. Why were they Latinized?
Oh yeah, it started, this Latinization as a phenomenon is very interesting. It started at the end of the Middle Ages, at a time where it appears evident that England is going to lose the 100 Years' War, and in a context where the elite in England starts to realize that French might be the language of the enemy. And at that time, linguists started to look at Latin as a new source of new vocabulary. And also, they started to Latinize some French vocabulary already incorporated to make sure they look more Latin.
It's like a saliva became saliva whereas it was salive at first.
Absolutely.
Because it appeared more intelligent to sound Latin. Is that what?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you check a very good dictionary of etymology, if you check the word saliva that you just mentioned, the dictionary will say, okay, French word salive incorporated in the 13th century and then was turned into saliva, I don't know, during the 16th century, for instance.
And you mentioned also in your book that there was one author in particular who played quite an important role in bringing French words into English, and that was William Shakespeare.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. He imported large contingents of new words, and he was actually criticized for that at some point. And so words like frugal or pedant, were used for the first time in the English language following the importation of these words by Shakespeare, absolutely. Yeah.
And now you classify these 25,000 words into 4 categories. Tell us a little bit more about these categories in your book.
Yeah, the first one is the more obvious, and I actually call them the obvious borrowings from French. And it's funny, when I speak to English native speakers about the topic, most of the time the reaction I have is, oh yeah, Anthony, you're right, yeah, we have rendezvous, cliché.
Yeah.
So these words, obviously, when an English native speaker uses them, she or he knows that it's a French word. But this is a very small group. It's 300 words out of 25,000, yeah. So it's really marginal. The second group, I call them the transparent borrowings, and this is very different this time. 3,000 words, and same spelling, same meaning, both in French and English, And this time, people using them, they don't know they speak French. Like when they say village or fruit or table, village,
everyday words.
Everyday words, they have no idea it's French. The third group is adapted borrowing. So, and this is a very large group, 10,000 probably. And it relates to French vocabulary that was integrated into English, and which spelling was adapted to make sure most of the time that these words could be pronounced correctly. In fact, like muet in French, M-U-E-T becomes M-U-T-E in English, just to make sure it can be pronounced, for instance. And the connection, by the way, between muet and mute is not obvious, but once you know it, once you realize it, yeah, of course.
It's glaring, yeah,
absolutely.
It jumps out.
Yeah. And the final group is Old French. So you have 12,000 words, French words in English, that relate to Old French in the sense that the spelling was changed in France after the word crossed the channel or the word disappeared in France.
And what's interesting is in your book you say that Anglophones speak French without knowing it. Why are they in denial about this?
Oh, that you have to ask them. For sure, when you try to investigate the topic and speak to scholars or read materials about this question of the origins of the English language, most of the time really the information that circulates is that half of English is Latin. And but when you read authors during the Renaissance, for instance, they knew very well it was French, so they were actually very proud of that. So yeah, it seems that there was a change of mind, if you want, with respect to that question in particular. And I think those who know, they are in denial, but most of people, are just good faith and they don't know.
Because you say that people from Britain tend to not be so happy about it, whereas Americans find it quite interesting that
yes,
that
it's true. I'm based in New York, and the perception of the topic by the American public is enthusiastic, really. They like it very much. They find it very funny to realize that half of what they say or read every day is French. Whereas, yeah, I can face some bit different reaction from a British public. Because they don't know, and so they are surprised.
Now, things have changed since World War II. It seems like we're seeing an inverse trend happening where France has taken a little bit of a step back, and English has really emerged as the global language. And what's interesting is that here in France, it seems like people are afraid of an English invasion into France. We have an official guard dog of the French language called the Académie Française. We also have laws. There's a law from 1994 called the Loi Toubon trying to protect France. Is French under threat from an English invasion?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's true that since the 60s, it's hard to find a new French word that would have been integrated into the English language, whereas the opposite flow has taken some reality. In fact, in total, we have 500 English words into French. So you compare 500 to 25,000. So it's a small group of English words that were incorporated into French. And by the way, half of them are actually what we call aller-retour, which means, half
kind of back and went full circle.
Are initially French words that were a bit changed in England and then they come back, like budget, for instance, which in fact is clearly an English word, budget, but it comes from bougette, which is a French medieval word. And also half of this group of 500 words is not English, it's American.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. Yeah. And now what we're talking about these days is La Francophonie, where this month of March we're celebrating the week of the French language and Francophonie, French is, of course, spoken around the world. What do you see is the future of the French language? Do you think it's going to change? Is it going to become more hybrid?
Yeah, I mean, the first remark I would say is that the fact that the English language has become the universal language is a sort of testament to the French language in itself, because, based on the fact that half of English is French, the success of English is indirectly a success of French. As far as French language itself is concerned, I don't see any threat at all. And on the opposite, I think it's the second language most spoken, or at least in the larger group of countries in the world. So I don't see any danger of any sort.
And do you think there's a special relationship that's fostered by this language within a language? Do you think that French speakers and Anglophone speakers share something because of this connection?
I don't think so. For one clear reason is that on both sides of the Channel or on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean, no one has any idea of what we have just been speaking about. And again, in America and in England, they have no idea they speak French. And the French public, when French students learn English, it's not really a pattern that is exploited, you know. So,
and in fact, that's part of what you say in your book, is you hope that your book will actually help French people learn better English. And in
absolutely.
fact, you have a list of vocabulary words to learn, because French people aren't known around the world for their competence in English. So do you hope your book will change something?
Yes, the idea really for the French readers is to identify a large group of French words that they can use easily. You know, instead of saying big, you can say immense or considerable or monumental. And once you realize that, and I can tell you, once you start using these words, which are easy for French speakers because they are French words, then your level of English is going high.
So if you want to improve your English, just read this book. I'll remind you the title, L'incroyable histoire des mots français en anglais. So the incredible history of French words in English. It's at Walworth Publishing in Scarsdale, New York. Thank you very much, Anthony Lacoudre, for being our guest on the France 24 interview. Stay tuned on France 24, more news coming right up.